Hi there. Well, we're going to go ahead and look at section 1.6, which shouldn't take us too long. It's on rounding. And the first couple of questions, you're going to be asked to round a certain number, maybe to the nearest 10, but they're going to give you a graph. So here's an example. So round 52 to the nearest 10. And so if you were given a graph to the nearest 10 means, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Well, the 52 falls between 50 and 60. So obviously the 52 would round, it's closer to the 50 than it is to the 60. So in this case, since 52 is closer to 50, that 10, then you would round down to 50. All right, and another example here. Round 57 to the nearest 10, and given a graph, again, between 57 is between the 50 and 60, and 57 is closer to 60 than it is to 50, which means that since 57 is closer to 60, you would round up to 60. Normally, we don't think of it as a graph. Normally, what we do, if you were to look at these two, 52, if you were to round to the nearest 10, this is where you need to know your place value. You go to the 10 spot, ones, tens, and you look to the right, directly to the right. And that's the only number that you'll look at here. And if it's less than 5, 1, 2, 3, or 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, then you leave this one alone. Everything to the right becomes 0. So if you're rounding to the 10, everything to the right would be 0. If you're rounding to 100, everything to the right would become a 0. Or just like what we looked at with 57, rounding to the nearest 10, and you look to the right, and since this is 5 or larger, 7 is 5 or larger, you increase the 10 spot by 1. So this would become 60. And what follows becomes a 0. That's normally what we do. So we're going to look at some examples here. Let's see, here they are. As we go through some examples. Let me turn this over. All right. So let's go through these right here. Let's take number 5, for instance. If we want to round that to the nearest 10, we go to the 10 and you look to the right. Since it's less than 5, we would leave the 6. And then what comes after are zeros. So the answer would be 60. Let's go to the next one here. We go to the 10, ones, tens spot. And we look to the right. Just a minute, I need to get this other sheet of paper out from underneath there. It's a little hard to write. So then we look to the right, and if it's less than 5, which it is, it's a 1, we're going to leave that alone. So we have 5, 9, and then what follows the spot becomes a 0. So you get 590. Let's do another one. Again, here we go to the 10. We're still rounding to the nearest 10. They'll always tell you where to round to. Ones, the tens spot is right there. You look to the right. If that is 5 or larger, you'll increase this digit by 1. So that becomes 6, 5, that's a 2. And then what follows is it becomes a 0. All right, so that's rounding to the nearest 10. Let's do another example. Let's round to the nearest 1,000. In this here, 1, tens, thousands. Excuse me, ones, tens, hundreds, thousands here. So we'll go to the 1,000 spot here, and we're going to look to the right. So when you look to the right, that's 5 or larger, so the 5 becomes a 6. And then these 3 become zeros. All right, so after it becomes a 0. Let's look here. We've got ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. There's our thousand spot. So we're going to look to the right. It's a 0. You don't care what follows. It's just the number directly to the right. Since it is less than 5, we're going to leave the 4 alone. We're not going to increase it. So we have 6, 7, 4. The other numbers become zeros. And you don't have to put the comma in. Actually, I just assume not. But if you do, that's fine. All right. So you come up with 674,000. Okay, let's look at the other one, our next one. On this one can be a little confusing. I think you guys will be fine with it. But we're going to, again, round to the nearest 1,000. So we've got ones, tens, 100, 1,000. We're going to look to the right, the number right to the right here, which is an 8. Since it's 5 or larger, we're going to increase the 9 to a 10. So this becomes 3, 5. Now this 9 is going to go 1 up, so that becomes a 10. So instead of 19, it's 20. All right. So when you have this, when this increases to a 10, you add it to the 1 in front of it. So you can come up with a 20, 19 to 20. And then the last numbers that follow your 1,000 spots become 0. So that's rounded off to the nearest 1,000. So when you increase this 9 by 1, okay, it becomes a 10. You'll have to add it to that one right there. Okay. All right. So that's rounding to the nearest 1,000. And, they may have you round to the nearest 100 as well. I'm sure they do. Okay. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the rounding in order to estimate. When they say estimate, that to me, it means make it simple before you add. So here they want you to estimate each sum or difference by rounding to the nearest 10. So you round first before you add. So they want you to round each number off separately to the nearest 10 in this case before you add them together. So let's look here. The 34 rounding to the nearest 10. Okay, you go to the 10 spot. And you'll look to the right, it's less than 5, so you'll leave this one. You'll leave that digit as a 3 rather than increasing it. Here, go to the nearest 10, look to the right, it's less than 5, so you leave it, that 10 spot, and then the number behind it becomes a 0. Same here, go to the nearest 10. Look to the right, it is 5 or larger, so you're going to increase the 2 to a 3. And what follows that 10 spot becomes a 0. After you round those off, now you add them together. So this is a 0. And then you add these, you got 8 and 3, and you get 11. 110 is the answer. So again, you round before you add or subtract to the place value that they tell you. Let's look at number 12. So again, we're finding the difference here in this case, and we're going to round to the nearest 10. So here's our 10 spot. So looking at that, you look to the right, it's less than 5, so that this 5 will stay. So 500, that stays, and what follows is a 0. Same way here, you go to the 2, it's in the 10 spot. You look to the right, since it's less than 5, the 2 stays. And what follows becomes a 0. What follows, your place that you're rounding to, becomes a 0. Now that you've rounded these, then you subtract. I'll put my little subtraction symbol in there now. So 0 minus 0 is 0. 5 minus 2 is 3. 5 minus 2 is 3. So your answer is 330. All right, let's try another one, just in case. To the nearest 10, so we'll go to the 10 spot. With this 4, we'll look to the right. It's larger than 5, so we're going to increase the 4 by 1 digit. So here we have, that's 5. That's going to become a 5, and what follows is a 0. Here, we go to the 10s. You look to the right. It's less than 5, so we're going to leave the 2, and what follows becomes a 0. And we'll subtract them. So you get 0, 5 minus 2 is 3, and then you have the 5. 530 is your answer. So again, round before you add or subtract. Okay, let's turn this over. You can find the product or the quotient. The product, like we talked about in the last video, means to multiply. It's the answer in multiplication, and the quotient is the answer in division. So again, in this case, we're going to round to the nearest 100 rather than the nearest 10. So we're going to go to the 100 spot. So we have 1s, 10s, 100s here. All right. So we've got, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll just bring it down a little bit here. So we go to our 100 spot. We look to the right. It's greater than 5, or it's 5 or greater. So we're going to increase the 2 to a 3. And what follows, the digits that follow become zeros. Here, the 5 is in the 100 spot. We look to the right. The 4 is less than 5. So we're going to keep it as a 5. We're not going to increase it to a 6. We'll keep it as a 5. And what follows becomes zeros. And then we'll multiply them together. Now, this is one of those where we can use that little shortcut that we talked about in the last video. You've got these zeros that follow, so you can just multiply these two together. 3 times 5 is 15. And then add 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. And there's your answer. All right, so 150,000. All right, let's try another one. Here we have the 7. So again, rounding to the nearest 100, this is our 100 spot. 1s, 10s, 100s. So we have our 100 spot, we look to the right, it's 5 or greater, so we'll increase this one to an 8. What follows becomes 0. Here, the 2 is in the 100 spot. We look to the right, it's going to stay because this number to the right, just right to the right, is less than 5. So we have 2, and then we have our 0, 0. The same as this, with these zeros here, you can just multiply these two together and add 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. All right, so there's the answer. Okay, let's look at this division one where we want to find the quotient. And again, we're still doing the hundreds. So we've got, let's see, go to the 100 spot, which is in the 4. And we're going to look to the right. And we're going to, so because it's less than 5, we're going to leave the 4 alone. 24 divided by, here we've got, we go to the 100 spot, which is the 3. We'll look to the right. Since the number to the right is 5 or larger, it's a 6. We'll increase this one to a 4. 0, 0. So now we'll be taking 2,400 divided by 400. Let's see if we can come up with some easy ways to do this. Okay, what you can do is you can cross these off here. And we'll be looking at this idea further when we start reducing fractions. But this 0 can cancel with this 0 can cancel with this 0. And again, just kind of a little shortcut. Then you just have to take 24 divided by 4. and 24 divided by 4 is 6. And there's your answer. All right, rounding off, and then, so the quotient is 6. All right, the quotient is 6. There was no remainder in this case. All righty. Okay, let's look at, we can look at a story problem real quick. And then after that, I think that's, well, no, we have one other idea. So we'll look at least one story problem. Okay, so we have Enrique sold evergreens for a fundraiser at $21 per tree. If his sales total $756, estimate the number of evergreens he sold by rounding to the nearest 10. In a case like this, in order to find the total price, you would take the price that he sells something for, the price, times the number that he sold. And that will give you the total, well, I guess you could call it profit. The total profit that he made. No idea where that C came from in my mind. So the price times the number would be equal to the total profit or the total sales. Instead, if you didn't want to think of it as profit, but so the price is $21, and we're going to be rounding these off before we do anything, times, we don't know how many, and the total profit or the total sales that he made was $556. So what we'll do is we're going to round these off, and then we're going to decide to ourselves, are we going to divide or will we be multiplying? Do we want, do we want the quotient or the product here as our answer? Well, when you round these off, because we want to round off to the nearest 10, they'll always tell you where to round off to. We'll take our 21 and we go to the 10 spot. We look to the right. It is less than 1, or excuse me, it is less than 5. So we're going to leave that as 20, leave it as a 2, times some number. And let's go over here. We go to the 10 spot, which happens to be in the 5. We look to the right. 6 is larger than 5. 5 or larger, you'll increase this one by 1. So this becomes 760. Okay. Now, again, this goes back to our last section. When you want to find a missing factor, you take the 760 divided by the 20, and that will tell you a missing factor. So we will be taking 760 divided by 20. Well, just like in the previous one, I crossed off zeros. You can do that here with these 2 zeros as well. It's just like, it's the idea of dividing the numerator and denominator by 10, and we'll work on reducing. So all you need to do is take 76 divided by 2. Well, let's do that. Say we don't have our calculator. 76 divided by 2. Here, 2 goes into 7 3 times. 2 times 3, again, we're finding the quotient. 2 times 3 is 6. Then we subtract, bring down the 6. What times 2 gives you 16? Well, that would be 8. So we have 8 times 2 is 16. So there's no remainder in our quotient. The quotient is 38. So that means if we take 20 times 38, we'll get 760. So we sold about 38 trees is what we came up with. So it's about 38 trees is what we sold. All right, and again, it's just about, because this is an estimate. Since we rounded, it's an estimate, it's not exact. All right, well, I'm hoping that kind of clears up any rounding, if you had forgotten, that's kind of clear now. The only other thing that you have to do in this section is deal with inequalities. So as a review of inequalities, before we do some samples, these are inequality symbols, all right? And you can also have, well, here, this is less than, Okay, is less than is how we read that. So I could have 5 is less than 10. So the small end always points towards the small number. Maybe you guys learned, the crocodile eats the bigger number, or the bird eats the bigger number, because it kind of looks like a bird's beak, I guess. So here, greater than, you could say that 12 is greater than, that's how that symbol is read. So the top symbol is less than, and this symbol is read is greater than. 12 is greater than, we'll say 2. 12 is greater than 2. Or 5 is less than 10. This symbol here, if you want to say is not equal to, you can just take an equal sign through a slash. We can take, 7 does not equal 3. They're not equal to each other. Other symbols that you can have is less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. So what you could have, this is a true statement. 5 is less than or equal to 5, because it's an or. So this means that you can either have less than, 5 is like less than 10, or you can have 5 is less than or equal to 5. Or you can have 10 is greater than or equal to 10. This is true, this is true. This is also true. 5 is less than 10. This is also true. 12 is greater than 2. 7 does not equal 3. When you're reading this one, it's 5 is less than or equal to 5. This one, 10 is greater than or equal to 10. So that's also true. All right, so let's look at a couple of examples that I have here for you, and then we'll be done. They want you to replace this. Notice they're not using the or equal to, so that does matter. They just want you to use either less than or a greater than in here. Now, when you're when you put your cursor here in this box, one of these symbols should show up on the bottom in Pearson. All right, so then you can just click it. All right, so here 12 is greater than 7. Okay, the open end always points towards the larger number. Okay, 56 is less than 64. Okay. Number 21, 101 is greater than 100. And again, it's just a matter of learning how to read these. 312 is greater than 12. So the pointy end is always, the smaller end is always towards the smaller number. In this example, 516 is less than 561. And our last one, 48 is greater than 42. All right, well, I hope this helps you with your section 1.6. And if not, please let me know and I can help you out. All right, bye-bye.